Hello and welcome to the Accessibility in Gaming podcast, the podcast about the accessibility, successes, and setbacks of all things gaming. I'm your host, Shelby Farley, also known as the Blind Gamer. In today's episode, as previously promised, I will be discussing New Phone Who Dis. This is a card game created by the same people who made What Do You Meme?, which I haven't personally played because I just assume that it's too visual considering meme is in the name, but I would be willing to bet is still an amazing game considering how much I love New Phone Who Dis. New Phone Who Dis has been my favorite tabletop game since I first played it in December at a Christmas party that I hosted for my friends and I. I have had the game much longer than that, but haven't had anyone to play it with until then. And I am so glad I finally got to play it with some people. This is an adult party game, so it's not suitable for children. I believe they do have a family edition as well, but since I don't have kids of my own and rarely play tabletop games with kids in general, I really haven't looked into it at all. I will try to remember to leave an affiliate link in the show notes for you to check out if you're interested, as well as an affiliate link to the version that I'm going to be talking about today, which is for adults 17 and up. The game is meant to be played with 3 or more players, something that, in my opinion, sets this game apart from games like Cards Against Humanity and even Apples to Apples, is that what's written on the cards is in text message format, and also uses some text message lingo that you may hear nowadays, and some other slang that some people will get and some people will not. There are 2 different ways to play, which I actually just found out while preparing for this episode. You can either play the classic version or the DIY version. The classic version is the version I have always played and the only version I was aware of. And in that version, at the beginning of each game, every player will draw 7 reply cards, and the oldest person in the group will be the first judge, who will then draw an inbox card and read it out loud to the rest of the group. Then everyone else, so all of the players not including the judge, will look through their reply cards and pick out which one they think is the funniest response to the inbox card. They will then give the card face down to the judge, and once the judge has everyone's cards, they will read the cards out loud and choose which one is their favorite. Whoever's card ends up being the chosen card for that round gets a point, and then the person to the judge's left becomes the new judge, and the process repeats, basically until you get bored and decide to end the game. And at that point, whoever has the most points is the winner. In the DIY version of the game, at the beginning of the game, everyone will draw 4 reply cards and 4 inbox cards, and then the oldest person will become the first judge, and instead of them reading off an inbox card and choosing their favorite reply cards, all of the other players will look through their cards and choose one of their reply cards and one of their inbox cards to try to create the funniest combination, and then the judge will read out each of the combinations and choose their favorite reply and inbox combination as the winner for that round. After the winner for that round is declared, then the person to the judge's left becomes the new judge, and play continues until you get bored and decide to end the game, and then whoever has the most points at that time is the winner of the game overall. Hopefully that makes sense. The DIY version is the version that I only just found out about while preparing for recording this episode. So while I'm not great at explaining either version, I'm even worse at explaining that one. So I apologize for the very scattered and confusing explanation, especially for that version. But now that we have the how to play portion of the episode out of the way, let's get into what will probably end up being a much shorter portion of the podcast episode, which is discussing the successes and setbacks, accessibility-wise, of New Phone Who Dis. Since it is a card game and not a board game or a role-playing game, there are much less moving parts, and therefore there isn't quite as much to talk about accessibility-wise because there's not as much to it in general, but it is still a game and still has things that are accessible and inaccessible about it, and therefore I feel like it warrants its own episode, even though the main reason for the episode is probably going to be pretty short. As far as the pros, accessibility-wise, for New Phone Who Dis, the first of which I just briefly touched on a moment ago, and that is that New Phone Who Dis is a card game and not a board game or tabletop role-playing game. This is a pro because you just have to keep up with the cards rather than trying to move pieces around a board or flipping over timers or finding alternative methods for timers or rolling dice or anything like that. There's less of that you have to keep up with. I know for me personally, one of my biggest struggles with board games is having to move my piece around the board. Since the squares are so small and I can't see very far away from me. So card games like New Phone Who Dis are nice because it's just a matter of drawing and reading cards. Another pro to the game is that the backs of the cards are marked in very large print with inbox and reply. So as long as you have some vision, it is pretty easy to tell which pile of cards you are drawing from. That way you don't end up drawing a reply card whenever you're meaning to draw an inbox card, or drawing an inbox card when you mean to draw a reply card. Something else that I feel like is done pretty well with New Phone Who Dis is the contrast. The text on the inbox cards is black with a fairly light colored background. I'm not sure if it's gray or tan or what, but it's a very light background. So the text really stands out on the card, making it easier to read. And the writing on the reply cards is what I believe is white on a dark blue background. That contrast isn't as great in my opinion, but I feel like it still works pretty well. I think something that would be better is white text on a black background, but different contrast works for different people. So what works for me might not work for someone else, and what works for someone else might not work for me. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. Unfortunately, since this is a card game, it is very text-heavy. And while the things that I just mentioned are definitely pros, they're not very helpful for someone who is completely blind. For example, while the cards are marked in very large print with inbox and reply on the back so you can tell which is which, if someone is completely blind or their vision is still too bad to read even that large font, they're not going to be able to tell which is which. A solution for this could be to put Braille on the backs of each card, labeling which ones are the inbox cards and which ones are the reply cards, or cutting off one of the corners on all of the reply cards so that if someone picks up a card and feels a corner is missing, then they know it's a reply card. And if they pick one up and there is not a corner missing, then they know it's an inbox card. Another issue with the text is that even if you do have some vision, the text is very small. Whenever I personally am playing, I always have to use some kind of magnification to read the cards. Usually I use the camera on my phone. Sometimes I will use my portable magnifier, but I have to have some kind of magnification because the font is just too small for me to read. Unfortunately, even though the contrast is really well, I still need magnification. While someone with better vision than I have may be able to read the cards fairly easy without magnification, I just can't do that. And if someone is completely blind, then it doesn't matter how big the font is, they still won't be able to read it. So to me, it would be really helpful to have Braille on the cards. Unfortunately, this would mean the cards would need to be larger because Braille takes up a lot of space. But having Braille on the cards would mean that more people could actually play the game, which would be really nice. And even people who already play the game, like myself, could really benefit from having Braille to reduce eye fatigue, which I know is a big issue with me because even with magnification, my eyes get very tired playing this game and other games that are very visual. So having Braille would be beneficial for multiple reasons. But yeah, those are basically my thoughts on the accessibility of New Phone Who Dis. If you have played New Phone Who Dis and you have thoughts on its accessibility, please let me know. I'm very curious to hear your opinions. But that is going to be it for this episode. In the next episode, I will be discussing the video game Fuser, which I have some very strong opinions on. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you are a disabled gamer and there is a game or some type of gaming related gear that you would like me to discuss in a future episode, or you're a game developer or you create any kind of gaming related software or device, and you would like me to test how accessible it is, at least from my perspective, then please let me know. You can reach out to me at accessibilityandgaming@gmail.com. If you would like to connect with me, then you can find me on social media. As far as my gaming socials, you can find me on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Hover at The Blind Gamer, TheBlindGaymer. Or you can find me on my main social media accounts, such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat at Shelby Farley, ChelbyFarley. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Accessibility in Gaming. I am your host, Shelby Farley, aka The Blind Gamer.